You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
This is Ken Vellante with Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and I am so pleased to have Nancy Houser-Bluhm, who is an author, a speech language practitioner, a thinker, a blogger, an explorer. So she seemed to have the best attributes to come onto the podcast. Nancy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you as a guest. I wanted to ask you right off the bat. You have different talents. You've done different things, but the first question is: were you an artist? Were you a creator when you were born?
I think my knee-jerk reaction when I thought that might be a question was probably no, but because it took me a long time to consider myself creative. But I was always a writer, always a journaler, always writing some little thing, loved words, and I surrounded myself with people and that were very creative from the traditional point of view, good artists, that type of thing. And so I was always measuring with that bar, but because I was always writing and drawing a little bit, I was thinking about that. I was really good at drawing trees, which seems, when that came into my head today as I was thinking about that, I thought that's coincidental. I mean, lots of people draw trees well, but I felt like that was my one little gift, if we had to draw something spontaneously. So I think I always liked creativity, but writing was the way I found my voice because I didn't necessarily grow up feeling like I just, communicated my ideas well to people. And it was through writing that I did that.
Yeah, and no, I appreciate you saying that. And of course, as we get into it, there are what I would say wonderful and deep components connected to trees and to nature. That come about in your book that we'll discuss. Uh, in hearing you mention that you'd be drawn to drawing trees when you were younger, it really kind
I
of gets
know.
at that question when you discover is like I did draw 200 like sketches of that tree, and maybe there was something there was there was something beyond drawing me to it. So I mentioned the book, and I think it's. I mean, I'm a book junkie. I recently moved all my books, and one of the things I said to somebody who was by me, I said, "Hey, look, as you get older, your obsessions, including books, can keep compiling, and they can keep aggregating." And the amount of books I had was a testament to obsession. So, bottom line, I enjoy books, and you've written Whispers for Terra,
Mm-hmm.
and put out that book. And you said you've journaled, but let's talk about a book. Let's talk about the book. Um,
Okay.
you set that out as a you set that out and said, "Hey, I'm gonna write this book." What was going on? Why did you feel the need to do that? And what was that process like moving from journaling or shorter writing to a more extensive book project?
Yeah, it was fairly daunting for me because I had never really entertained the idea of writing a book. I just always told myself I couldn't do that. I didn't have a story, and I never thought I could write dialogue. And I took a online writing class during one of my spring breaks, and several different speakers, an hour long a day. And throughout that process, I realized I was like, maybe I do have a story in me because I was able to jot down enough ideas. And um, then one of those speakers, serendipitously, um, Sage Adderley, came through with an email and said, "Hey, I'm offering this idea to outline course that's free, and then I'm out offering book in 90, where you write your first draft in 90 days. And I was like, why not? Let's give this a shot. So um, I was I was pretty amazed actually with things that flowed onto the paper. And it was really sitting down and doing that outline to start with, even though it wasn't very well defined, but I had enough ideas. And there was a Neil Gaiman book, Gaiman, I'm not sure how we say his name, that wrote American
I've heard
Gods.
his name pronounced both ways. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah.
He, in the intro to American Gods, he made a statement that he had all these little snippets of ideas, from some from dreams, some from just ideas. And he was like, how do I put these all into one book? And they just magically did. And that was kind of the way mine got started. Was I wanted something to do with nature and earth, and I wanted a speech pathologist in there because we often are misunderstood in what we do in our careers. And so I just knew I had these things I wanted to bring in. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's great to hear about how you're able to pull it in that way.
mhm.
Um, uh, the one of the pieces of the show that has come up that I'm deeply interested in personally, but also what it does for anybody who encounters it is just a general idea of healing or connection to nature. Um,
Mhm.
During the course of the pandemic, what's happened for me is I walk a lot
Mm.
more, and I go into the
Mhm.
woods more deliberately as I can. Can you talk about that? I've had a guest or two talk about forest bathing, immersion within the forest,
Mhm.
cleansing in a spiritual and emotional way. Can you get into those pieces for you personally, and within the story of what's going on, what catharsis, what's going on by going into the woods for you, for the character, uh, for you?
I grew up loving nature. My dad and I would take a lot of walks, and we lived pretty rurally. I always saw little creatures in our garden, and imagined, that the things were alive that were in there. Um, so I've just always enjoyed being out in nature, a lot of camping in my life. And I feel a peacefulness that, um, and a clarity when I'm out in the woods. And, for my character, Mary, it's where she finds respite from, just a hectic, somewhat life that she feels dismay over. And um, so for me, the woods just always bring a sense of calm. And I recently did a forest bathing experience. And I was talking with some people about how amazing that was, because especially, I don't know if it's everywhere, but definitely out here in Colorado, we're always hiking to get to, we do 14ers and we do power sort of
Yeah.
hikes and that type of thing. And never stopping to look around. And in the forest bathing experience, if we walked a half mile in 2 hours, I'd be shocked. I think it was more like a quarter mile. And we sat by the river for a long time, and we listened and used all the five senses. And I really have made a point of trying to build more of that into my life after doing that, because it's I've always seen faces and that sort of thing in trees. I've always noticed things, but I feel like recently I see more life. I drive by trees and I feel like, wow, they're glowing more than they used to. So I feel like I'm waking up to nature after writing my
Yeah.
book, because some of it was fantasy. Well, a lot of it was, like the talking part. But
Well, and I think with I think within that, which is which, I think that's part of the magic or the mystery. I've had guests on talking about that experience, and, you
mhm,
know, and what is actually in there, and how you as a person are experiencing, right, with greater realization.
right. Mm-hmm.
I know I had an interview with Zoe Presley, who does tours and integrates psychology and such into the forest bathing experience. And for listeners, forest bathing experience in general is the idea of physically going into the forest or connecting with nature, even a small component of nature. And as Nancy had said, using your senses for a more immersive uh, contact
Mm-hmm.
with the world, I guess, is the general um, summary. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for your thoughts on that, Nancy. Uh, there's another component that I wanted to get in, like towards the beginning and chatting with you, is your professional work. As we had a brief discussion, I work with different type of workers in the work that I do professionally, and I was wondering if you could kind of give listeners a little bit of a sense to something they might not come in contact with as much as the practice of a speech and language practitioner, and
Mm-hmm.
um, just some of that work that you've done. Because I know when I mentioned that to folks outside of, say, maybe the education or K to 12 system, it's not quite clear some of the things. It's not a job that's that well known. So I was wondering if you could make a few comments on that component of what you do.
Yeah, just stop me when I go on too long. Um, speech pathology, I don't, it's been um, a wonderful field for me. I've done it for 40 years and I've never been bored with it. And I worked in healthcare for 20 years and and I worked in clinics. I worked with all age groups, but 10 years I specialized in the skilled nursing facilities and, which really did draw a lot of the stories from just bulk of experiences, 10 years in that that I um, inserted into the book. But it's really about communication, and it morphs into other things, but they all really relate back to communication, whether it's working with patients with dementia or with neurological diseases, or helping people with their voice quality, you know the gender of voices, and um, helping people be the best communicators that they can within whatever limits they have, whatever resources they have. There's augmentative communication where people use devices to communicate. Um, and then you get into the school age population, and notoriously we're known for working on S and R sounds, and it's so much broader than that. And it's working as much with executive functioning skills as well, all those things that go into the way we think, the critical thinking skills, in order to be able to convey deeper, more expansive sort of thoughts, and social communication. There's so many, um, you know, many speech pathologists have written lists and lists and lists, and they do wordles about all the things that we work on. But it really boils back down to the power of communication and helping give that, the best that people can do, give them that ability.
Yeah. Um, on and thank you for that work. I've become more uh attuned personally, at least in creating to the within a podcast, primarily audio, and thinking about the sound
Mm-hmm.
of the voice as opposed to my deep love and fascination is movies or games integration of video and sound. But I found with the podcast I've been able to think more about just the sound of the human voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm deeply curious, and it was very helpful to hear your description in getting into that of how fundamental that is, and
Mm-hmm.
to help people along to be able to say and communicate and express. That's kind of, I don't know, sometimes it feels like that's kind of like the main thing we're always trying to do, right?
Well, I think it is. It is a gift, and it's interesting for me now to be thinking about how so much of nature communicates with one another, and the similarities in, like, the underground network of mycelium and that sort of thing, and how it parallels to our own brain, interfacing and the internet and all of those, that it's, in some ways we're just an extension of the communication network of what there is,
Yeah.
already existing in nature. We learned it much later than nature did to communicate.
I don't know exactly what the answers are, but I might share a belief. We might share a belief that I think they're going to be found in the woods. I don't know what they are as we ask these big questions, but I think the location of where we may encounter them would be the woods. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Nancy, we're speaking with Nancy Houser-Bluhm. She's done a book, a very good book, a very unique book, Whispers for Terra. And one of the things, Nancy, as you know, we're going to kind of delve into a couple bigger conceptual questions and talk
Mm-hmm.
about art. In the show, I'm always interested in creation, how things are created, why they're created, what they're supposed to do for us humans. But I wanted to ask you the big question. In creation or creating things is about art. I wanted to ask you what is art?
For me, I think it is the inner expression, the inner feelings of what people have that they need to express outwardly, is what, I believe art is. I think that it, something that needs to be shared. People feel a real, they feel compelled to share it in some form, and it's a reflection of our own self and our beliefs. And I think it's part of the reason that artists can feel so vulnerable when they put it out there, because it's really, I find, a reflection of something that they care deeply about, feel deeply. And so it is, there's so many different ways that it can be manifested, demonstrated, but it's always something from inside the artist that they
Yeah.
want to express. So communicate.
Yeah, communicate. Yeah, such a thank you for that. And I think it anticipates, and I never want to answer the question for you, but I ask an attendant question to what is art is about what is its role? What does it
Mm-hmm.
do? What does it do for us? You mentioned communication, but what's art supposed to do for us as humans? Why do we need it around us?
Well, I think it shows us, it can amaze us. I think it gives us a level of, um, amazement of our world. It helps us consider things that we might not be considering. I think it can be, a common ground for many people when you're standing and looking at a Van Gogh or something, and there's somebody next to you, you don't know their beliefs, you don't know their politics, you don't know anything, but it's common ground at that moment in time.
Yeah.
You have a commonality, and I think art can really bring people together and provide insights that people haven't thought about, look at things in a different perspective, a different angle than what they had before.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. I was talking recently about like I'm in components of like gaming, the art that goes into video games, the immersive experience, and
Mm-hmm.
how you can have. I'm not trying to like build it up to something that it's not, but just the idea of as people interact or players interact, there is some cross cultural contact and communication of
Mm-hmm.
the thing that you're doing. Sports, sometimes people say sports do that. You're playing the same sport together. You don't know the language. Or like you said, if you're in front of a Van Gogh and your jaws drop like a quarter and the person next to you, their jaws drop like a quarter, like you're like, oh my God, yeah. It's like you're trying to explain it, but like that person's like in a very similar space than I am right now,
Right.
being like, what
Mm-hmm.
the hell, like, am I looking at? How does that make sense? How does this exist?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
Yeah.
and
So it can definitely shift our thinking, about people. It can shift our thinking about, anything going on in the world. Um, I think art is very important. And, I think it's sad anytime you think about that it's not, that sometimes due to budgets, it could get removed, from the schools, any of the arts, the music, any of that, because I think it gives an avenue to people to express things that maybe they're not expressing in traditional manner. So,
Yeah,
um,
I think, and sometimes when I see an integrated idea of like within teaching or education where art is integrated and what it does for the brain. I was having a conversation with an artist and talking about bringing art or like the idea of bringing art into organizing or labor organizing. For him, it was
mhm,
such a weird idea because he's like, it's the constituent property. Like art is the constituent property of how we educate, of how we organize, of creating things to pull people together. And there's something where we've got kind of lost, or there's not enough art that we're trying to like impose it from the outside and be like, where's the art in here? Where he sort of is more foundational um, of an artful way of looking at teaching. Um,
mhm.
or education. And as a professional educator, in with the speech and language, the creativity and the art that goes into that, we start to think a little bit more expansively. Nancy, I want to jump back
Um,
again here, back to sometimes it's viewed a little bit more of another origin question, but there's a personal aspect in your blogging and what you create and what you talk about. What I wanted to ask you is, um, who or what made you who you are?
um, I think I would have to start with my family life growing up. We had just kind of a typical middle class family, but it was we had lots of good rituals and routines, and we weren't like a Leave It to Beaver family or anything like that. But it was a pretty easygoing family, and we had family drama, but we were all pretty close, and had relatives and other close friends. So I think it gave me a space to explore and think um, about things, where people that are not as lucky, and they have more they live in poverty, or they live in wondering where their next meal is coming from, or they have trauma in their life. They're in survival mode, and I think I was able to grow up looking around. I didn't was not a big dreamer. I didn't have that sort of life, but I did feel like it afforded me the opportunity to look around and explore, kind of be in my head a good amount of time. And then I dedicated my book to all those people who say those incidental things to you along the way, that just give you that glimmer of hope. So when things are not good, you can repeat that. "Oh, I remember when that teacher said this to me," or something like that. There's so many instances of those that we hold on to through those difficult times. I think that definitely helped shape me. And then to set me on the path for communication, it was um, communication 101, in college. I had a teacher named Dave Fredericks, um, and he really challenged us about. I grew up in this Gidget mindset of communication, where there was always something not said. If you just asked the question, you could have found out what that person was thinking, but it was kind of the mind reading mode. That if they care about you, if they know you, they're going to know what you're thinking or feeling. And so I had this incident where the teacher had another teacher had given us such a hard test that everybody either got a D or failed it, and we were all like ruffled, and he
Yeah.
wanted us to fail, and he didn't, but this teacher was telling us, you don't know what that guy's thinking until you go and ask him. And he challenged another classmate and I to go talk to the teacher. Um, and he was a wonderful man. We knew that, but we thought he really wanted us to fail. And he was so devastated by our coming to him and saying that, because he said, I teach because I love it. I want to teach geography to people. I want them to learn. And I was astounded, because I was like, I was so sure that I knew what he was thinking, and I didn't. And that just blew my communication style out of the water, I think. And
Yeah.
so that was probably one of the most instrumental that set me on the path of, and it took years really to keep developing that skill and to get past my Gidget mindset. But I feel like I know now that if I really want to know what somebody's thinking, I have to ask them. And that was really an instrumental point in my life. So,
Yeah, gosh, I love that. I love that story. I do. Yeah, and I think you mentioned just kind of some of those incidents or something that seems somebody said in passing that
mm-hmm.
kind of never went away. I think sometimes within education, I always love that statement. And I've seen it here or there, and it's a picture of a kid, and it said, my teacher said I was smart, so I was.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
words and communication, how when somebody says, "Hey, this is what I see," and they might not even be thinking that much of it. It's just a reality for them, and you hear it, and you're like, "I didn't know I was that until that person said that." I
Oh,
I didn't know that I stuck out in that way or anything. It can be
right.
pretty special, right?
Yes, definitely. I think it's one of the, I don't know, the best things, that teachers do is give belief, in oneself to their students. And so it's very instrumental when, what teachers words, teach words matter, the teachers words really matter to their kids. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I got a different question, Nancy, that it's been knocking around in my brain a little bit. I didn't tell you what it was, but I think you'll have a quick. I hope you have a
Okay.
quick answer. But yeah, like I said, anytime books are around, I can, as a book junkie, I can jump into things. But I was wondering, as a creator, you're starting to write, you're running into some trouble here or there. You're like, how the heck do I write? Did you in your mind think of a writer or a technique, or go back to some, if you got stuck, to say, think of other writers, because writers are always thinking of other writers. Did you ever, how'd you get, if you got stuck or got caught somewhere, did you rely on something in your head to kind of pull you back?
Probably not so much in my head, but one of the things that was brought up in the writers group I was in was not to be a lone wolf. And I was someone that, um, I'm someone that I feel like if I was a good writer, I should be able to just write it all by myself. I don't have to consult, or, I knew I had to research, but I should just know what to do. And, some of the best things were conversations with some friends and with my husband. And I was saying, I don't know how to make this tree alive, and we would just have a glass of wine and we'd discuss it and we'd brainstorm. And, his whole family is really super creative. And I have friends that would say, I think you need something whimsical in there. And, so for me with the writing, and then when I'd get stuck, I would go out for a bike ride or walk my dog. And I would just get in, ask myself that question, what, what should Mary do next to the, how should she respond to that? Um, and then I would come up with an answer. So some of it was a little serendipitous, but some of it was really reaching out and being open to feedback from other
Yeah.
people and other people's ideas. It was kind of um, that was a real learning thing for me to be able to reach out and say, hey, I'm stuck here. What do you think? And sometimes I'd use the ideas and sometimes they just spurred another great idea. So,
Well, it's a great step, and I know how. I think it would feel clumsy to most anybody, making that step and being like, "Hey, what does this look like?" or reaching out. And
mm-hmm.
I can say for myself personally that that's a big step. And I think a lot of folks who create when they've done that, I know when I've been around an environment, in getting that energy or feedback, or being in the environment where you're like, this would work or this wouldn't work. There's this,
Mm-hmm.
verve to it that can help you pull you through. So,
Right.
um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna thank you for that. So again, we're talking with Nancy Houser-Bluhm, writer, works speech and language, communication
Mm-hmm.
overall, trying to communicate. Nancy, as you know, on this question, there's some big questions, and the biggest one, which I have to ask, is: can you tell me why there's something rather than nothing?
um, you know, when it's in my book, I feel like the book is something rather than nothing because it does raise up some real issues about our earth. But I believe, like in life in general, is something rather than nothing. But I have a personal belief in um, an afterlife that we don't know what it's going to look like, but I kind of believe in reincarnation, and I believe what we do in this life, the things we say, the brings we don't know what things are important, and so we may as well treat life like most things are important, and that in some way what we do will be used later on, and that um, we will benefit from just being good people in the world and
Yeah,
being so I think being good is something rather than nothing.
yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that answer. I wanted to ask you. I feel like sometimes when I've had guests on, there's always a lot more we can go, you know, into the deeper ecological, environmental, concerns of
Mm-hmm.
the age that we live in. And I one of the things that I found, and I just wanted some comments from you, is that I feel, and a lot of folks that I'm around feel, that, like, on an environment in general, we're screwed. Number one, two, we can unscrew ourselves, maybe, but looking around other people then hang their head again and being like, well, you know, like, uh, like the what we do at this moment, since the woods and the environment, in your writing, your for yourself, is so, deeply important and vital, and I share that as well. What are your thoughts on what we're trying to protect, on, the ability to go into the woods and for them to be, you know, the woods for us, and for us to care for them and protect them?
Well, I feel like everybody, if you pick one thing, there are, and I bring this up in the book, and I got it from other research I had done, that there's so many things out there that need to be done, so many tacks we could take in trying to improve our world, our climate change, and if everybody latched on to and really took on a charge with some aspect of it, we'd be moving things forward. Whether it's the soil, or whether it is the water or the plastics or whatever, the multitude of things that there are. And it can feel overwhelming and defeating because it's like, you know, that game where you bop something on the head and it goes down,
Yeah,
and it
whack-a-mole,
pops up
right.
somewhere else. Yes, yes, it's like that. It feels like it's, insurmountable. But if everybody really stayed moving forward with whatever they aspect of the earth they take on, I think things would, because there's so much life we don't know about in the ocean, and then there's the atmosphere, and our the woods for me and for many people provide so much. They give as much as we get. We get so much from them, but they give us so much more emotionally, health wise, everything. So I would love more people to take the importance of that on, and I think it's happening to some degree. I just love when I hear about New York City having gardens on rooftops and that type of thing,
Yeah.
because I feel like, all of those things can come together to make a bigger difference, but it sounds insurmountable. And we have maybe gone too far, to ever be able to go back to square one, but, with things. But I think with awareness and the more books that and more information that's out there that raises awareness, we might do what art does and impact and shift some thinking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I appreciate your comments. And I know it's a monster of an issue, but
mm-hmm,
I do appreciate your thoughts on it because, like I said, the premise I think of our conversation was how important that can be to psychology of humans, or a connection, or a
mm-hmm,
certain harmony, that we're able to get from that. And
right,
maybe that space can help, protect it too, by going into that
mm-hmm,
space and clearing our head. Um, all right. So Nancy, in finishing up here, what I wanted to ask you is, you got the book out.
mm-hmm.
You do other projects and journaling stuff. So how can folks find, what you're doing, find the book, learn about, maybe they learn a little bit about speech and language, or in communication. Where do folks go to find you?
I have a website, nancyhouserbloom.com, and the blog is called Minderings. I love blended words. Minderings is a place for the wandering of your mind.
Yeah.
So that's the blog and the website. And my email is n.houserbloom@gmail.com. So any of those, the book's on Amazon, it's in bookstores. I really want to put a shout out to, because I live rurally, so I do a lot of online ordering, but indie bookstores are such a delight, and any bookstore can order the book. So, and I guess I should say, because a lot of people confuse Tara with like Tara, like from, Gone with the Wind, and Tara is Terra. So,
Whispers for Terra. Yeah. Thank you.
yes.
Thank you for that. And I'm glad folks will be able to find your wonderful book, and that is generally available. And of course, however choose to purchase it. But this is an
Of
indie
course.
podcast, and I have spent a decent
Mm-hmm.
percentage of my life in indie bookstores and indie comic bookstores. So
Mm-hmm.
there is that. The best place probably to
Right.
find. Nancy, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on to the show. As you could hear in the questions I asked, there are different components of what you do and what you think about that help me, and I think can help listeners kind of think about the issues that we talk about. But thank you for creating, and thank you for taking the risks that you have. It's clear, any artist takes risks, but I know you've had to take some to put this out there. And thank you for taking those, because that gets us to this conversation and kind of like looking at things more deeply. So I wanted to thank you deeply for coming on to the podcast.
And I want to thank you for having me and, taking a chance, because I am new to this, arena. And I also really appreciate the work you do on a day-to-day basis, with helping people in the schools and that sort of thing, because, we need friends, we need
Yeah.
supporters, and people that, really try to raise up the importance of what people in the school systems do. So we appreciate your work too.
Yeah, thank you. I know there's you can always put more into it, you always put more effort. I mean, working people, no matter what you do,
Mm-hmm.
working people, it wasn't easy before the pandemic. It isn't easier
Right.
during the pandemic, and so I'll keep plugging away, and you
Okay.
do like and you do likewise. Nancy Houser-Bluhm in her book "Whispers for Terror," which you can find in or order online, or get through your local bookstore. Thanks again, Nancy, for coming on, and certainly hope to look and see more art from you coming soon.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing,